Yeah, so man, I'm just, how how personal is it for you? I mean, how do you experience love? What was your path? What were your experiences? We can go all into that,
Loads of topics
I would
there.
to have a one-on-one conversation about what the course means to you. That's basically it.
Or, I mean, I've been, in December, I will have been studying the course on and off, but it will have been the sort of the foundation of my life in spiritual practice for 43 years. And I'm only 63, so that's a good chunk of my life. Um, and it's gone through many phases, but at this point, I can truly say, not only am I studying it, but perception itself really does start to change. The world begins to feel quite dreamlike in some respects.
Wow.
Which doesn't mean that you don't get hooked, and you get pulled back into the ego's insanity. But when you do get pulled back into the ego's insanity, you recognize it much more quickly. Bill Thetford was once asked, and this isn't my story, it's out there in the community. He was once asked, how do you know if you're making progress? What metrics can we use? How can we tell? And he said, well, how long do you hold a grievance? Uh, and I take that even further. How quickly are you even aware that you are holding a grievance? Because until you're aware of it, you can't do anything about it.
Mm-hmm.
And better still, how aware are you of situations that are likely to trigger grievances or specialness, and enter them already with help, with knowing that, he goes there with me. So I think that, that's, you get to a place where, you don't make any decisions without help. Because, if you do, they just don't work.
Wow. Well, Dr.
Yeah.
Bob Rosenthal, here we are already. I was going to say, let's start the interview, and we already did. So thank you. I'm just going to use that too.
Cut that part out. Yeah, that's
Oh,
good.
yes. Let's just jump in and say hello to everyone. And this was a great, great introduction. So welcome, Dr. Robert Rosenthal, co-president of the Foundation of Inner Peace. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes. It's a pleasure to be here, although the beauty of the virtual world is I don't know where here even is. We're united in a virtual oneness.
Yeah, isn't that a nice metaphor? That's really cool.
It
Yeah,
is.
yeah. So we were speaking about grievances, and I would say, well, grievances, guilt, and all this negative stuff could be easily called the opposite of love, what we also would like to talk about. It's beautiful. It's great to have you here, and I'm really excited to hear from you. Also, personal experiences. How was your path? How is your path with A Course in Miracles? How is your awakening going? And so forth, So, yeah, let's hit it right there.
That if you ask someone, are you enlightened? And they say, yes, I am enlightened. They can't be enlightened because in enlightenment, there's no I. So you could say enlightenment happens or enlightenment is, or you can, I guess, borrow a temporary sense of identity and say, yes, the I that I am not is no longer. But I can certainly talk about my path. I think that, when I learned of the topic, Awakening to Love, which is, it's a wonderful topic. It is what the Course is all about. I started thinking, well, what would be some of the things that I would want to share and emphasize about that? And I think, there would be sort of two components of that, or two parts. One would be, right out of the introduction to the course. This course does not aim to teach the meaning of love, for that's beyond what can be taught. It aims at removing the blocks to your awareness of love's presence. So if we're awakening to love, it's a great word, awakening, like, oh, we were asleep and we roll over, or the alarm clock goes off and suddenly we wake up and, there's love everywhere. And some people want to treat it that way. As a psychiatrist and psychotherapist, though, I think that we can use our spirituality as a defense to avoid looking at those blocks to the awareness of love's presence. Ken Wapnick was very focused on this. So on the one hand, if we're going to awaken to love, what we really want to be doing is looking at where are we asleep to love? Where are we blocked? And that would be bring us right to the arena of where do we have grievances and where do we enshrine specialness? Where do we make specialness special in our lives? Because they're really two halves of the same coin, two sides of the same coin. The ego likes to put some things on a pedestal because it needs to give us something to worship so that we believe that it's valid and that, we can stay in this world of illusion and get something out of it. But it's also, the ego is a jealous God, small g, and it's a little petty tyrant, and it stomps its feet, and anybody who threatens it in any way, it doesn't like that. So there are grievances everywhere. And I think that in my experience, and this is personal as well as professional as a psychotherapist, you start with the big grievances, the obvious ones. That person from high school that you hated and haven't talked to in 10, 20, 30 years, and you still think of, and and your teeth clench. And, you start with those because they're so obvious. But then you begin to forgive those. And forgiving doesn't mean saying to the person, oh, all those abuses that you heaped on me, oh, that's just fine. As the Course says, forgiveness recognizes that what you thought your brother did to you has not occurred. That's really powerful. It hasn't occurred. What the Course does is it's a blanket amnesty. It says everything you thought happened in the past didn't happen because the past doesn't exist. So rather than you're forgiving someone by excusing their bad behavior, which of course is forgiving to destroy, puts you on a pedestal and now you're the better person, what you're really doing is saying, oh, I was mistaken. And they were mistaken too. So if we're both mistaken, why am I still holding on to this? However, as time goes on, you begin to focus on, the more day-to-day grievances. I guess there's no order of difficulty in miracles, and there's no order of degree in grievances either. Even the tiniest one will take you off your path and send you skidding into, the valley of ego. So what do I mean by small grievances? Well, for those of us who drive cars, and I've driven on the Autobahn, which is actually far more sane than American highways. But what about that person who came up behind you hard and stayed on the back of your car, tailgating we call it? What about the person who just shot you a dirty look? I joke that anyone who has children has had the experience of watching your grown child look at you in a certain way, and you go, what did I do? And they go, what do you mean? Well, you were just looking at me. No, I wasn't. And husbands and wives, my wife will say, what now? And I'm like, what? And it gets to, oh, I was thinking about something in my head, and you saw the expression on my face, and you thought it was about you. And it wasn't. But it's a really good example of how minds are joined. We do interpret these things as if they were about us. And when we are lost in our own minds, thinking about something from the past, some grievance, something that bothered us, some insult or shame, it's reflected outward, and it does affect everyone around us, and that's not even looking at the psychic transmission. So, as time goes on, you become more aware of those as well, and you want to let go of them. You want to release them. You want to dispel them. And dispel is a good word, because in English, to spell, in addition to being about letters, it's, putting a trance on somebody, casting a spell. So we're dispelling, we're removing the spell of the ego. We're waking up from how it's bound us in its world and kept us in grievances. And then finally, you get to what seem to be the tiniest of grievances, which really are the constant, relentless judgments that the ego mind makes every second about every person that it encounters and about every situation that it finds itself in. And when you really, yeah, exactly. And when you start to see it at that level, at first there's a sense of hopelessness. Oh my God, I'm doing this all the time.
Yeah.
What's the matter with me? But in truth, it's a good point, because you are seeing how much of a prisoner you are for the first time. And you can't wake up until you know you're asleep. You can't escape from prison or be released from slavery until you know you're a prisoner, or until you know that you've been enslaved. So you begin to see, whether it's in the car or walking down the street, oh, this one looks good. She's hot. Oh, he looks terrible. That person looks arrogant. And, this one looks really smart, probably smarter than I am. I mean, we are making such judgments. Oh, they're not from my country. That one's darker than I am. That one's lighter than I mean, over and over and over. Even in the arena of spirituality, who's enlightened, who's not, I mean, my God, it's relentless. And so when you get to that place, how do you handle it? You don't try to take away each little tiny judgment. You go to that blanket amnesty that is the atonement, and you say, Holy Spirit, take this from me and look upon it, judging it for me. I don't know anything. I can't judge anything. That is the place of real power, when we realize that our minds, our judgments are screwy. They get us nowhere, even if we think they're really good. I was talking to someone I knew in the late 1970s and the early 1980s. We were in my first Course in Miracles group together. He was a practicing psychiatrist at the time. I was still studying. I was, in medical school. And of course, I went on to become a psychiatrist, and he reached out to me recently, and he's still a course student. And he was sharing how, as a psychiatrist putting the course into practice, he can no longer do what we think we were supposed to do, which is, help people feel better about their egos. and I sort of laughed, because I had come to the same realization. And what I'd been doing the last 4 or 5 years of my psychotherapy practice was just, offering the entire session to the Holy Spirit before it started. Give me the words. I always use the prayer, which is on page 28 of the English book. I am here only to be truly helpful. I am here to represent him who sent me, etc., etc. And what starts happening is people just start changing. People in their lives who they had grievances with suddenly show up and in a different way, and they have these conversations that are positive. And that's what this man was, he said, yeah, the transformation is incredible of what's happening, but we realize it's not happening because of anything we are doing. As the Course says, I need do nothing. It's happening because of what we're allowing in our own mind, that then generalizes and transfers that knowledge, that learning, knowledge in the little sense of the word, not the Course's sense, that transfer of learning to other people. So this is what's so cool, is you get to that place where you realize you really don't have to do anything. This is not, you don't need a doctoral degree. You don't need to know how to, fly a plane. I mean,